Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good evening, Rush Nation. We are back, and we are back in the fantasy playoffs. It's crazy. The warp speed of the season every year. I've been doing this like 9 years, and I still can't believe like how quick it goes. And yet here we are. We're here. You know, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be crowning fantasy champions. But to do that, we've got to get through the playoffs, and to do that, we've got to introduce our resident co-anchor, Danny. How are you, my friend? How are things over in the Emerald Isle this week?
Yeah, all good. Busy as usual. There's millions and millions of Christmas parties for the kids to see Santa. Just loads of stuff busy. But yeah, no, all good. They're all ready for the weekends and for the matches on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, my week's already been ruined with the Buccaneers losing last night. And just... yeah, I don't know what's going on. Like, I genuinely don't know what's going on. Like, to lose to the Saints was bad. This was arguably worse. And yeah, I mean, the Todd Bowles out brigade is in full force. Yeah, so my weekend's already been ruined, and then I'm going to watch some of my good fantasy teams probably go out this weekend and see where we are. But you know, this is the precious nature of getting buys and making sure that you secure a buy. Danny, how many buys did you get secured?
So I think I've got 20. I think I started with, if you combine all the teams from redraft and dynasty together, I have about 32 leagues. I think I got 24 of them into the playoffs. And out of that 24, I think I got six or seven buys.
That's very good.
There's something in that ballpark anyway. I'm not sure exactly, but
no, it's very good. It's a good return. Like high playoff percentage. I think if you're batting 70%, I think you're in good stead.
Well,
and then,
yeah, to be honest, a lot of those ones that didn't get in are the ones that I'm sort of rebuilding in dynasty as well. I had 12 redrafts and I got 10 of them in. Actually, no, I think I got them all in except one. The Patreon one is the only one that I didn't get, and that team just died of death for some reason. But all that
one of our Kings Classic teams didn't get in.
Oh yeah, and the one we share, yeah, that's one of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, won the draft, didn't make the playoffs. A lot of injuries in that one, to be fair. But look, no one cares about our fantasy teams. We care about their fantasy teams. That's what we're here for. And it is week 15. All the bye weeks are done. There's no more bye weeks. If you've earned a bye this week, use this time to prep ahead. We'll give you some strategy and some tips for that. But you got to win this week, and this week is a very interesting week on the slate. There's not too many high-scoring games as it currently stands. There are very few games that tipple over 50 points over under. I think the Ravens and the Bengals, I think, is the only one. Lions and Rams will be
two big ones, and then nothing much else.
Yeah, Lions and Rams is the other one, although last night's went over 50 as well. So if you started players in there, then you've obviously got off to a pretty good start. So
as long as you play against Pitt, as long as Pitt wasn't playing against you, yeah.
Exactly that. Hi, Chicken Wing Boom. Nice to have you on the show. Where do you want to start, Danny, for week 15 prep?
I suppose it's just about getting ready, isn't it? So, like, I suppose strength of schedule would be probably one that people are really interested in. I know it's going to be different per position as well. So I don't know if we want to work our way through the positions, start with quarterback and say which of them looking like the good fixtures for quarterbacks.
Yeah, sure. So I think when we're looking at quarterbacks, I'll probably give like the best 5 to 7 and then the worst 5.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's probably the best route. So for the remainder of basically for the fantasy football playoffs, best schedules, and this doesn't mean they automatically become starts. JJ McCarthy has got the best schedule. Again, probably not someone you want to put your fantasy tournament on, live on and playoffs on, but he does have the best schedule, and that's followed by Brock Purdy, who again doesn't have a high ceiling. So, but at least he's a startable option if you've got him. Shadur Sanders, again, not one you probably want to bet your tournament life on. Baker Mayfield. Although I do think there is some injury concern there, and I think we're starting to see that with some pretty average to poor quarterback play. Tyler Shook, who was very good against the Buccaneers last week, especially with the run. Jalen Hurts, who had an absolute stinker on Monday Night Football, probably cost a few people their playoff berths, has a good schedule. And then Jackson Dart and Drake May are the other ones. Although shout-outs to Lamar Jackson, to Tagovailoa as well. They have pretty good schedules, as does Joe Burrow and Marcus Mariota. The worst schedules on the board are Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Geno Smith, Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, and Caleb Williams.
Is there any that stand out? For example, say if we were talking about those teams that have got to buy, so they're not really interested in 15, but if it was just 16 and 17, does that change at all with some of those players, or is it the same, would you say, whether they're playing 15 as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly consistent. I mean, I guess we could look at each individual week and go through. I did that with streaming options for the DSTs, and I've got that all kind of prepped. But I mean, I can go through every single week, but
probably more for I'm thinking more for the guys around like any QBs that might be on the waiver list, you know, if you're going to stream them. Not necessarily like, obviously we know Drake May is good all the way through, but is there anyone there that you would think, okay, actually in 16 or 17, maybe if you're really struggling or you get an injury, this guy would be good cover?
I think with where we are with the quarterback landscape, you've got the good quarterbacks and then you've got the meh. Yeah. If you've got a good quarterback, even in a bad matchup, you need to play them. Like Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has a pretty poor schedule. I'm not folding Patrick Mahomes over somebody on the waiver wire. It caps the upside, but the bottom line is the floor should be pretty locked in. And that's something that I think people you can get too cute. And I think there's certain positions I think absolutely you can I think you can definitely stream. Quarterback position is not one I want to get cute on because the degree of variance is just way too high. Like the difference between like an average quarterback performance and a poor one is so great it will cost you. And I think when I look at the positions and think, if I have a top 5 or 6 quarterback, I'm not changing that based on schedule. And if you don't have a top 5 or 6 quarterback, then you've either been streaming, in which case you kind of dialed into what you need to do, and you would have actually prepared this in advance, or you are, like I look at those schedules, and there's no one on the waiver wire who I look at and think is available that I would want to play, with the exception of there's probably 2. One is potentially Tua.
Yeah.
If you've got a really bad quarterback option, Tua is a consideration, but they run the ball a lot. And then the other one is Tyler Shook. But you really want to bet your fantasy playoffs on a rookie with very limited experience. He offers some upside. Like I started him in a lot of places instead of Drake May last week because Drake May was on a bye.
Yeah.
But I think if you're playing your championship with Tyler Shook, there's a lot of risk to that I just think for me, I would rather take the safety of the position knowing I'm going to bank 15 points.
Yeah. I took quite a bit of Dart last week because he was on a bye and people had dropped him to win their matches. So yeah. I scooped him up in quite a few, and I'd sort of be quite happy to start him if I needed to.
Jackson Dart's a completely different proposition because he does bring a rushing floor, although what I would say is his fantasy points have gone down since the injury. We had this spate where we had, 19, 17, 23, 29, 19, 27, 26. He was off for 2 weeks and then he had 13 points and then the bye. I think that the injury has shook his confidence. I don't think we're going to get up to those 29, 30-point weeks again. But if he can get you 18 to 20 points, I think that's kind of all you need.
Washington as well.
Yeah. So I look at the quarterback position and think that's not a position to get cute with. A lot of people do think about it and think, if I can just stream and I can just get a bit extra out of that position. The risk to reward ratio is just huge. because you can literally chase 3-4 extra points, but it could cost you 12.
Yeah.
Or 10.
It depends on my team. So if they've got like a big bench, I would have someone as a risk on there as a cover if I needed them. Because to be honest, out of all those teams that I've got through to I haven't got that many QB 1 to 5s. Like I have taken risks and sort of gone a lot lower down and had a couple of them, and then whichever one has actually done well, I've then kept there, and it seems to have worked quite well.
I would say I'm looking at the top 10, top 11, top 12, top 12 fantasy quarterbacks. I'm looking at the top 12 fantasy quarterbacks. There is only 2 quarterbacks there that I would not be starting over anyone on the waiver wire. One is Daniel Jones because he's injured.
Yeah.
And the other is Bo Nix. So Bo Nix is heavily inflated by one 40-point game in week 7. Then he followed that up with a 25-point game. That's pretty good. Since then, 19, 7, 12, by 17, 16. Like he brings you a bit of a thrashing floor, but again, I think I'd take the chance on Jackson Dart over Bo Nix, especially when I look at the schedule.
Is he playing bad? Is he playing bad, or is it just that they're running more?
They're just running more. They're just in control of things. They're just not blowing out teams. That offense isn't really dynamic. And I'm looking at situations, and then Tua Tagovailoa over recent weeks it's been pretty bad because they're running the ball a lot. But then what I would also say is they've had the easiest portion of their schedule. So they have just been allowed to run the ball and just control it and just not have Tua make throws because they've not needed it. So, Tua hasn't broken 10 points in his last 3 games. And not in 4 of the last 5. But that's been the easier portion. They've had the Jets in there twice. So they can just run the football. But they're going to be in games where they're going to need to throw the football, and those points should go up a bit. But that's my point. The other side of it is there isn't a waiver wire darling at quarterback where you're thinking, oh, yeah, cool. There's a really good option out there. Like your best option out there is Tyler Shook, who, if we read out, his season, it's 5-10. He had 19 before the bye. That's pretty good. Came out of bye 9 points. It's only his last 2 weeks, 18 and 22. But, half of his performances have been 10 points or less, and half of his performances have been good. It's not a great hit rate when you're looking at those sorts of numbers. So there isn't those exciting numbers. Shedeur Sanders, everyone's going to point to last week where he had a phenomenal game in a shootout. Those 3 games prior was 2.5, 11, and 10. Like, you're not risking your fantasy tournament on these sorts of players. Even Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins hasn't had a great run until last night. So I just think for me, like, it's not a position to be messing with, and you want to swerve it. Now, other positions for sure, you can look at options. I would say that the one position you can probably look at that and really point. Well, I would say the tight end position, the kicker position, and the DST position to the ones that you can absolutely look at schedule and think there's some options there where you can pretty tinker. The wide receiver position, I just think the ceilings are going to be too low. And I think with the running back position, everyone's going to be owned. Like, you're looking at the players out there who aren't owned. Probably the best option out there is a Blake Corum.
Yeah.
He's probably the best option out there.
Yeah, there's not going to be anyone that you can just go start straight away and feel comfortable. It's more you're buying for things to happen or change for them to come in. Yeah.
So, like, if we're talking about the running back schedules, Devin Neal has the best schedule for the remainder of the season, followed by Trayvon Henderson. But then you got Chris Rodriguez, who's in a timeshare. Chase Brown's is pretty good. Bucky Irving's is pretty good. But when the team that team isn't running the football very well in the Buccaneers, so that doesn't mean much. Chris Rodriguez is in a timeshare. Devin Neal will be in a timeshare with Alvin Kamara at some point. You got Ashton Jeanty, who will put up points, but
Kamara's just been ruled out for the weekend.
Yeah, he has been ruled out for this week, so it's going to be Neal in week 15. Saquon Barkley, who isn't pulling up trees, has a good schedule. And then you get the Christian McCaffrey, Devon A. Chan, Quentin Judkins. They're kind of them three, and Henderson are the ones that like your leading light, where you can point to and think there's some good upside there. If we look at the bottom end, Kyron Williams has a pretty horrible schedule, which could lead to a lot of playing time with Blake Corum, and actually means you should be having Blake Corum as a Kyron Williams owner. Jonathan Taylor becomes a little bit of a risk. He's done so well to get you to your fantasy playoffs. Now, talent will prevail, schedule it 100% will, but that offense is not going to generate as many opportunities given it's Riley Leonard throwing the football and not Daniel Jones, who has been good despite many people thinking he was going to absolutely be trashed this season. RJ Harvey with Denver is a tough schedule. That team isn't moving the ball particularly well. Jalen Warren, the same. James Cook, I think, is above schedule. I mean, he has a bottom 5 schedule, but it's not a player I would be worried about for schedule. Another one is Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, I'm not worried about that schedule, given it's Jahmyr Gibbs and that offense. And I'm not really worried about Breece Hall in terms of from a starting perspective, but maybe a ceiling perspective. It might be difficult for him to get those high games because of the schedule. And also the fact that he's going to have Brady Cook throwing the football this week. Yeah. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. So that's the schedule. I mean, and again, these positions don't matter too much for schedule. Like I look at the schedule for wide receivers and it's DK Metcalf and Justin Jefferson. I think both of those for me are borderline starts. If you've got a stacked playoff team, there's an argument those players don't play for you. I've got a league with Justin Jefferson in it, and I won't be starting him.
Yeah, I don't know when I'm in any redraft. Thank God I got lucky with that this year.
Stephon Diggs will be definitely an interesting one. AJ Brown will be a good option. See Juwan Jennings. I'm not putting my tournament life in Juwan Jennings, but if you've got Ja'Marr Chase, Chris Olave, these are all good options for you. Jerry Jeudy's an interesting one. He had a good week last week, but is so remarkably inconsistent. You're looking at the worst schedules. Trey Tucker, yeah, fine. I mean, if you're in the playoffs, you probably won't be starting Trey Tucker in a lot of places. Rashee Rice, I'm not worried about him from a perspective of he'll overcome that schedule. Courtland Sutton has gone a little bit off the boil. Jalen Warren, I think he's the only show in town. He'll be fine. Michael Pittman is going to struggle anyway without the schedule. Ted McMillan's going to be fine on that team. Nico Collins, actually, I think has a great matchup this week, but overall, his next 2 matchups are really poor. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I'm not worried about those players from their talent and opportunity perspective. So I think those positions don't matter really. It's the next one. So tight end. And so the question came about Darren Waller. Darren Waller does have the best schedule. The problem you're going to have with Darren Waller is volume. Is he going to get enough volume? Because based on what we've seen the last 4 weeks, the volume isn't there. But as the schedule gets tougher and they're going to have to throw the football, there is a chance that they will throw it more and Darren Waller will benefit. It's what are you comparing Darren Waller against? Yeah. Like if it's a case of I still think there's 14 other tight ends I would start over Darren Waller, even though he's got the best schedule.
The funny thing is, though, those 14 might not necessarily be the 14 that people are thinking because, like, for example, Gadsden, for example, has gone off a cliff, but people are still starting him. And that was one of the questions was, should I start Waller over Gadsden? And you've got Gadsden, like, down at 22 at this point. Like, he wouldn't be one of those 14 you're talking about.
No. I'd be quite happy to just remove Gadsden now and be done with it. I look at the... For me, the only tight ends that you really need to be starting now are Mark Andrews, Jake Ferguson, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Harold Fanning Jr., Brenton Strange, maybe Tyler Warren, I think takes a dip. Kyle Pitts, Hunter Henry.
And what's name got it is
and Trey McBride.
Yeah, and Joker got ruled out today as well, so that's just firing up a little bit.
Yeah, and Bowers, right? Yeah, Bowers and Trey McBride are the other ones. I think Dalton Kincaid, you can make a case to isn't a must start.
What about Loveland?
Yeah, I mean Loveland has got a middling schedule. There's a case to start him. I think there are better ones. Like I think you're going to find Juwan Johnson maybe on benches that might give you a little bit more upside. I think Theo Johnson on in waivers might give you a bit of a better upside than Corsten Loveland, I think, over the next couple of weeks. But like for me, I even Dalton Schultz is a player I'd probably have over some of those as well. But I look at the tight end position. I think there's so many tight ends right now that are putting up points that are going to be some form of consideration that it feels almost like a trap. And I think that I look at the tight end position and think it's probably the strongest it's been in a decade, maybe longer, in terms of the amount of options. Normally you get to this point of the season and the tight end position has fallen off a cliff. You're struggling to get anybody, but there's always someone on the waiver wire you can start. It's actually quite a diluted position, and actually there's about 10 players that will be within 2 or 3 points of each other. So the position is a bit of a wash because there isn't those separators. If you don't have a McBride, you don't have a Kittle, there isn't the separators there outside of them. Yeah. So whoever you start, whether you start a Waller versus someone else, you're chasing a couple of points either way. And it's like, it's not a decision I think you need to sweat and spend big time on, because I think whilst it will give you an efficiency gain if you get it right, the chances are it's all going to come out in the wash. I think I would spend the time on your start sits. I would study your wide receiver matchups and exploit the wide receivers that have the best matchups. And that's something we can do. I think you're going to be better off focusing on your start sits and getting your edges there than thinking about trying to gain a couple of points streaming the tight end. But I think Darren Waller's worth a bet. Like I think he's worth a bet, but at the same point, I think he's just as likely to put up 7 points as he is to put up 15.
The only other tight end there was a question around like is I likely, as in whether he would be worth a punt or not.
Yeah. I mean,
again, it depends who you're comparing them against, doesn't it? Really,
it does a bit. I always, the problem I have with Baltimore is, first of all, Lamar Jackson doesn't look great. So he doesn't look great. He doesn't look healthy. They are struggling. So you need to get out of the mindset that Baltimore are the Baltimore offense that we know.
Yeah,
and I think you have to ding them 20%.
Well, there's also now a point that you made last week, and you said it's, when you were saying about how much detail do you go in and set the lineups, and one of the things you spoke about last week was the weather. And I saw something before around this Baltimore game where there's a chance it could be up to -14. So how does that could be potentially impacting some of these players as well, couldn't it?
And that could benefit someone like Likely because he's a bigger body. Yeah. He's more likely to catch the football. On the other side of it, they might throw the ball less and they might just keep the ball on the ground. It might be a great day for Derrick Henry. I always think in a snow game, you'd expect the ball to be run a lot more and pass less. Yeah. And then you have a game like Buffalo last week, which completely negates that thinking. So it's a hard one because logically that's what you would say is they'd run the ball more, they would throw the ball less, it'd be a higher percentage of throws made. And then you have a game last week where obviously the teams had set up for that. And then both teams exploited that setup and threw the ball deep and made big chunk plays and made big gains in the snow. Yeah. So, yes, the logic would tell you that and history would tell you that. But then we're seeing teams defy the thinking, which is what I would do as a coach, is I would sit there and think, well, they're going to expect us to do this, so let's do something different. Let's not just do what they expect us to do. So I think you have to... The bottom line is through all the conjecture and all the planning that you can do, it could all go out the window in the first 5 minutes. And so the way I kind of look at situations is this: how many top 12 performances has Isaiah Likely put in the last 2 years? 2, maybe? There's not many. 2 or 3, maybe. Like, again, it's this situation that people can get cute. I always think this. I would rather get a high percentage decision wrong, where it's going to be right a lot of the time, and wrong a small amount of the time.
Yeah.
And get that wrong, than bet on something that hasn't happened historically, or there is no trend or sort of expectation that outcome is going to happen, and betting on that to happen.
The other thing I would say as well is if you're picking, I don't know, 10 to 12 players in a team and you're looking at all the other positions, if you're taking a risk there, you might not be able to take the risk somewhere else. So it's about, you might want to take one risk within your lineup and try and keep the majority of where you think they're going to get. And then someone with mad upside, or could be nothing at all, you might take the risk on that one player because you're close to winning, but maybe not close enough. You take one punt, but it's weighing it up with the rest of your picks that you pick in your team as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really smart thing to think about. And I think I just give you an example of this, right? You have to look at, in the playoffs, it's very different because you need to think about who you're playing. Yeah. You need to think about where you can get advantages. And you can get advantages, we talked about this last week, from picking the best streamers so that your opponents can't. And that's a way of net gaining points, is leaving them with an option that's not as good. You know, there are other ways to mitigate point differentials, but you have to study where the likelihood of the game is going to be. You have 14 weeks worth of data to know what your average team score will be, what their average team score will be. And these apps like Sleeper will tell you that now. They'll tell you what your average point scores are. They will tell you the trajectory of the match. Projections you have to take with a pinch of salt, but if you're projected to win the match by 20, you know you're in a position where you take less risks. And actually, it's about mitigating the risks that your opponent can take. So I would be taking those long shots off the waiver wire that doesn't allow them to take those shots. So if you're worried about, say, a Adonai Mitchell, get him off the board, stick him on your bench, and you know you can't get beaten by that angle. And you're reducing the angles in which people can really come at you and try and get this across. But, you know, Isaiah Likely puts up 20 odd points, that's luck, that's not skill. And I point to Isaiah Likely's what's he got this season? He's got 50 fantasy points in PPR over the season.
Yeah.
So you're trying to manifest an outcome that has not happened this year.
I suppose the other thing though as well is, like, we're talking here around you're playing against someone else. What about when you're in these big tournaments? So I know some of our patrons are still in. I got knocked out this week, but I know some are still in Scottish Bowl. So likes of those type of competitions, or Warrior Bowl, where you're playing against the big fields. What should you be? What's the way to go and approach it from that side?
I mean, you have to swing for the ceiling. The difference with each tournament has a different merit and a different cut line.
That's going from 1,000 to 500 this week, I think, isn't it?
So you have to sit there and go, if I'm above the 500 cut line, and I have been consistently all season, like Mark has, I wouldn't be taking the risk. I'd be playing safe and I'd be getting over the cut line.
Yeah.
If you're someone that's on the edge of that cut line and isn't doing very well, and you're number 984 in average points, then you might as well swing for the fence.
Yeah.
Because you've got nothing to lose. Because if you set the best lineup that you have on paper, it's going to lose anyway. So I think you have to, and like each tournament's different. So like I can't really sort of conceptualize every tournament, because Warrior Bowl, the cut line is less harsh, and it you have to measure up where your performance is.
The other thing is, well, you can also treat it a little bit like DFS. So like you've got your 6 o'clock slate and you've got your 9 o'clock slate. So if you by the time you come into the next set of games and you're looking at where you are, you then might, if you're projected to be round about the cut line, then you might start changing it and putting some riskier players in who might have some more upside. So there's different ways you can play it. Like, I'm not saying that's the best way to play it, but it's definitely an option.
My worry with that is it's very late to pivot that way, and depending on where your over and under points sit and where the average point scales are going to sit. So the first thing you should do, first of all, is set your lineup so that your flex plays are the 925 slate or later. right? And so many people put the wrong players in the wrong flex spots.
Yeah.
And you just need to set that all your standard positions are 6 o'clock, and then your flex spots are the 9 o'clock slate onwards, right? Or the 4:25 slate, 4:15 slate, whatever it is in America, right? I think the problem that I have is that at this point of the season, people make really bad decisions. And they're making decisions based on trying to get too smart, where they will bench good players because they've got bad matchups. They will perhaps try and beat a system that isn't there. Like, again, I go back to Isaiah Likely. Like, if you're thinking of starting Isaiah Likely this week, you're mad. And he might go on and have a good game. He might go on and have a good game. Like, he goes and scores 20 points. You're not a genius for predicting that. You're not a genius for predicting that because you're projecting something that's never happened.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about in situations like where a few weeks ago I told you to start Adonai Mitchell, and there's a pathway to that happening because we're in a unique set of circumstances where that collective group of players have not all been on the field at the same time. And we're in a situation that we find players in roles they've never been in before, and the ball has to go somewhere, and you're sort of not expecting it, but there's a chance that happens. And it did. Whereas you strip this back and you look at, Isaiah Likely's played most games this season. So what has changed from the first 14 weeks of the season to what has changed now?
Not much, yeah.
So when you're trying to manifest an outcome, and you've got 14 weeks of data that's telling you that outcome isn't going to happen,
well,
you're asking for something to change that hasn't changed.
I think people are always looking for that.
Of course they are.
Because the one that jumps out at me is from you from last season, and it got me through some matches, and it just sort of came out of nowhere. Was that Valdez Scantling last year at the back end of last year? All of a sudden, I'll throw him in it felt like throwing him in for a punt, and then all of a sudden, the next 2 or 3 weeks, he just went off, and he was getting crazy points compared to what he'd done for the rest of the season. And I suppose they're the types of players people are looking for now to try and pick something up like that.
But you have to look at how that manifests.
Yeah.
That was not a big leap. So you have a player, Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
A player, Rashid Shaheed, who is their deep ball threat, who was having a phenomenal season to that point. He gets injured.
Yeah.
They then activate a player off the practice squad who has a very similar skill set.
Yeah.
And they plug and play him into a role that's been made vacant. And you've got an archetypal type player that fits into the system that they've got.
Yeah.
And there's a vacancy in that role. So for me to say, I'm targeting Marcus Valdez-Scantling, there's a logical pathway to where I'm thinking. Now, it could still not pay off. And there's many times I've made that linear leap and it's not worked. But I'm not trying to manifest something that hasn't happened or has no pathway to it happening. It's one player's gone down, another player who's very similar is going into that role. There's an expectation that similar situation can happen.
Yeah.
And that is what happened. Adonai Mitchell, there's no deep ball threat now that Garrett Wilson's off the field. They will throw the ball deep to try and get some points.
Yeah.
Who's the deep ball threat? It's Adonai Mitchell. Throw him in a lineup, see what happens.
Yeah.
So are there any of those examples out there right now? There's not many. That's the problem is those situations will come up, but you have to...
over the last few weeks, like, for example, Michael Wilson, because Harrison was out, then all of a sudden he's come from nowhere and he's gone off because there's no one else for them to throw to in those positions.
But there's a couple of reasons why that has happened. That needed a lot of things to happen the way it's happened.
Yeah.
It needed Marvin Harrison Jr. to go down. It needed Kyler Murray to be injured / benched.
Yeah.
And it needed Tyrod Taylor to play out of his skin. And it needed a favorable schedule from what the Arizona Cardinals were facing.
Yeah. And it got
so a lot of things had to happen for that to happen. Now, again, people went on that because, and again, we told people to pick up Michael Wilson. I didn't expect the outcomes that we've expected because Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't getting those outcomes. Yeah. So no one projected that Michael Wilson was going to be a top 12 wide receiver. So I think we have to scale the expectation a little bit that wasn't it, but he was definitely a serviceable play because, as you say, who else was going to catch the football? But it took a lot of things for that situation to occur the way that it did.
And
I think
kept me in it stopped me from getting relegated in towers as well, because I started him and he got I think it was 28 points, and I stayed up for that, literally for him and a couple of others.
And I mean, there are these situations that when they occur, and it's great when it happens, right? And it is great. It's hard to project that those things are going to happen, but like I'm looking at slates this week, right? And if you want to know the players that I'm sort of banking on that have got high upside based on their coverage, based on their targets per route run, based on the teams that they're facing, I'll give you a list of names right now that I absolutely would be starting in a lot of formats this week. And actually, ironically, Colston Loveland is one of those. Against Cleveland, she should see more targets this week. Now, I don't love Loveland the next 2 weeks, but this week I do really like him. I like Juwan Johnson this week against Carolina. I think he's going to see a lot of good looks. He should see an increase in targets per route run. You see a big jump from him this week. I'm expecting a bounce back week from Juwan Johnson. I think Chris Olave, for a similar reason, you're looking at the way that Carolina play. I think there's a really good opportunity for Chris Olave to make bank this week. I love Nico Collins this week. I think it's a really good Nico Collins week against Arizona. I'd be taking advantage of that. I think he has every opportunity to probably have a top 5 wide receiver week this week. Players that perhaps have been under the radar and players who perhaps haven't done particularly well, who could be really interesting, though, are Xavier Worthy against the Chargers. I think he has a good opportunity there against that cover 4. He might have a really good opportunity to get open. And Andy Reid's smart enough to change where the ball goes and exploit that. And I think you can see a significant jump. He might double his target this week. That's how much I think that matchup is skewed in his favor. So I look at Xavier Worthy and think there's a really good opportunity there. And that's a player that's been on most people's benches for most weeks. I look at Dallas Goedert, who's had a couple of bad weeks. I think he's in line against Vegas to have a really good week. And I think Chimere DK and Eilik Iomanor against San Francisco should actually get significant bumps. They're a really good team. But actually, with the cover 4, those 2 players schematically should do really, really well. And they should get a significant lift in the amount of targets that they'll see versus what they do normally. So I look at those sorts of players and think there's really good opportunities for each and every one of those, and think that there is a really good prospect to those players doing really, really well. I like Theo Johnson too. I think he's got a good matchup this week. Those are the kind of plays that I would be looking for. A lot more, and I'm fading players like I don't like Juwan Jennings this week. I think it's going to be really tough for, say, Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin this week. I think against the Packers and the way that they play zone, I don't think it's a week for Sutton and Franklin. I don't think it's a good week for Ken Walker. Again, these are the sorts of things I look at, and I think the time can be spent on your start sits and where to start, where to sit players in your lineup, than opposed to trying to find efficiency. I look at the waiver wire now, and I think the waiver wire is trash. I think the waiver wire is trash. I think there's very little on the waiver wire that's going to improve your team if you're a playoff team. Yeah. So I think don't point to the waiver wire. Add some running backs that we talked about last week. But if you're looking for that lightning to strike, you got 2 weeks to kind of make it happen. And there isn't anyone out there right now that I think that's a wide receiver I'd be stashing for, a situation to happen. I'd be looking for players that have been dropped. Mike Evans would have been dropped. I was telling people to pick him up. I'd be looking at Garrett Wilson where he's been dropped and see if he comes back next week. Those are more the situations I would be looking at than trying to play the lightning in the bottle game.
Yeah. DSTs.
Yeah, DST. So I think, your DSTs will pretty much be stacked for this week. I'm telling people to go and get Jacksonville wherever they could. If you couldn't get Jacksonville, then San Francisco, New Orleans were pretty good options this week. But I'm going to give you the DSTs for the next 2 weeks. So for me, Jacksonville was the number one DST like the all weeks, right? So Jacksonville will continue to be number one. If you pick them up, kudos to you. You're going to have every chance because they're going to be probably my best DST over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I like Seattle next week. The Texans against Arizona. Philadelphia against the Raiders is a good one. And Chicago Bears. But they're pretty high owned, so I don't think you'll find them anywhere. But the Dallas Cowboys against Minnesota could be a really interesting one as well. And then week 17, again, Jacksonville against Indianapolis and Riley Leonard. I like that. The Seahawks against Carolina. I really like the 49ers against the Chicago Bears, the Texans against the Chargers. I like Pittsburgh as well against the Cleveland Browns. I think that's a really good, strong lineup as well. The 49ers, as I've already mentioned, that's a good one. So they're my favorite DST options for the next couple of weeks.
Kickers, are we saying just stick to the dome for now?
Yeah. I think Evan McPherson's still out there in a lot of places, which I think is baffling. I'd just pick him up and I think you can fire him up the next couple of weeks for sure. But yeah, try and stick to the dome, stick to favorable conditions. Chase McLaughlin obviously had a great week this week and was a player that will probably be targeted over the next 2 weeks as the Buccaneers will look to win to get into the playoffs. So I think he's a really good option for most people as well, is try and get Chase McLaughlin. I think in this case, I would actually be chasing the kickers that have got those longer legs. So for me, I like McLaughlin, I like Boswell, I like Cam Little. There are 3 kickers I would really be interested in having on a lot of teams, and Evan McPherson as well. They're kind of the 4 that I'd be targeting over the next 2 weeks in all situations, because at the end of the day, your leg for field goal is almost just as important at this stage as the amount of field goals. So, you need those field goal kickers. They're going to get those 50+ opportunities. Teams now at this point of the season will be a lot more conservative. There's a lot more to lose now than there was 14 weeks ago. So you're going to get lots of situations where those teams that are in situations trying to get into the playoffs will kick more field goals. So again, I look at teams like Tampa Bay. I think they're going to try and kick more field goals. So I think Chase McLaughlin is a great option. Same with Jacksonville and Cam Little. They've got more to lose. They will want to kick field goals to win the division. And I think those and Chris Boswell and the Steelers as well. Those kickers, those teams will opt to go for 3 instead of 7. They'll take long field goals and settle for them to keep the scoreboard ticking over. So I like those options. If the weather suits, I like those options over the next couple of weeks at the kicking position.
Just in general, outside of not any specific position, are there any of the players that you could see based off results and stuff like that at the moment where they might be starting to wind them down a little bit, where people might be high on them and then all of a sudden they find that they're not actually playing the full count for each of the matches? Or is it too early for that yet?
The ones I've kind of keeping an eye on. So Kyron Williams is a big one. Kyron Williams' usage just dropped. I think that the Rams feel pretty comfortable that they're going to get into the playoffs.
Yeah,
and I think they feel enough confidence in Blake Corum that they will split time with the backs. I think that they will be. I think that could go as much as a 50-50 backfield.
Yeah.
In the coming weeks, and I think they'll want to rest Kyron Williams for the playoffs. He's had a long couple of years. I think they'll take this opportunity. I think there's not a big drop-off between the two. Let's just run Blake Corum more. Let's try and get the rest to him. And I think Ken Walker will be in a very similar boat, and I think Zach Charbonnet could see an increase in time as they get closer to the finishing line.
Yeah,
I think those two teams in particular situations and teams that I think you will see some rest coming their way. I think that's about it. I don't think you're going to see loads. I think, I don't think they're going to rest Henderson because he didn't play the first half of the season that much in New England. I don't think that Denver are a deep squad. I don't think they've got the luxury to bench that many players. They might say, hey, the difference between RJ Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin is so great that maybe we just take RJ Harvey out of games for a bit. That could happen. But I think it depends where they are in a week or two for championship week.
The opposite. So, say for example, I might be reading this completely wrong, but it feels like they've been managing Barkley's time. Is there a chance that they might ramp him up a little bit now because of a few losses to make sure they get over the line?
See, I don't think they have managed his time. I don't think, like, people are looking at it and thinking he's not. He's playing just as many snaps as he normally would. The difference is not. So if I pull this up, I'm going to just pull something up and just give you the raw data, right? A couple of ways. So we go to the touch maps, and again, we're looking at Saquon Barkley is 5th in the league in touches.
Okay.
So he's 5th in the league in touches. So you could argue, yeah, he's probably seen a small little drop in touches this year, but it's not astronomical. But then if I pull up the snap share, if you bear with me, and this will paint the picture. I just want to make sure I get the right numbers to you.
Kenny Pickett's just been confirmed the starter for the Raiders as well for the weekend.
Yeah, I think that was pretty set a few days ago when they all but ruled out Geno Smith. So, yeah, I had to pick him up in a league because in a Superflex league because I lost 2 quarterbacks this week and one of them was Geno. So, yeah, if I look at Saquon Barkley in week 13 ran 94% of snaps. Week 14, 80% of snaps. He is currently the 3rd highest running back in terms of snap percentage share in the NFL behind Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. He's ahead of Bijan. So they're not managing his workload. Like they're not
like it, yeah, because it's probably because of what the output that he's getting.
It's a lack of efficiency. The difference is that they're trying to play him. How much of it's form and how much of it is bad offensive line? He's not finding the gaps. We talked about this a few weeks ago that he's out there. And again, this is why I wanted to pull the numbers up because it's so easy to say like, oh, he's playing less. He's not playing any less now than he was. He had 1 week before the bye. We played 61%. Every other week he's been above 70%. And in fact, most weeks he's been above 77%. So he is sitting there well above, like the last 3 weeks playing above his average percentage as well. He played on his average in week 11, then above in week 12, week 13, and week 14. So, yeah, I just, there's a perception here that he is getting less time, and he really isn't. The one I would point to that is getting less time last week was Ashton Jeanty. He only played 68.8% of snaps. And there's a world, and we've been talking about this a few weeks, where they put him on the shelf.
Yeah.
I think that could happen. But let's look at Kyren, and this goes to my point on Kyren Williams. So Kyren Williams, up until the bye, was playing consistently around about 75% of snaps. So these are his numbers since the bye: 67, 60, 68, 65, 66, 52. Now, the 52 was in a blowout. So they just went, you can sit and we'll play Blake Corum. But my point is that his numbers are not trending in the direction of someone that is a bell cow. And those numbers I expect to be in the 60%, 65% ranges where I'd expect Kyren to be. And then as they get closer to clinching a playoff berth, then I think those numbers will drop south even more. Again, Tony Pollard is an interesting case because, again, he's only been playing 50% of snaps. He's been a pure 50-50 timeshare, and he got a big spike to 60% last week. But yeah, I look at the numbers and I just think there's not really the players that you're getting those drop-offs at the running back position. Yeah. But those can all change as we get closer and closer to the playoff scene, one way or the other, as teams get close to clinch. One player was worried about Jonathan Taylor. I'm actually not worried about now they've got Riley Leonard out there. But if I look at wide receivers, the players that have been on the fringes of wide receivers and seen less playing time, Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, these are all players that have taken dips in their snap share in recent weeks. Darnell Mooney, Egbuka already played 64% of snaps now that Mike Evans is back. That's an interesting signal to keep an eye on. Jalen Waddle down to 78% of snaps. Michael Wilson's snaps dropped in week 14, but he was pretty high without the team. Brian Thomas went the other way. He's up above 80% of snaps now. He's healthy. Quentin Johnston, his snaps went down. Now they're on a slight increase. I these are where I'm kind of looking at those particular gains and thinking of players like Devontae Adams, but he left the game hurt, but he's only playing about 75% of snaps. They're managing his workload right now. But every time he's out there, he's getting the ball. And that's where that targets per route run metric is highly important to look at and to understand who's getting a target percentage. And then so you can find some of this stuff in premium sites. And if you subscribe to our Patreon, take advantage of that. Happy to tell you, I'll share a data tree of the targets per route run guys, and I'll drop that in the Patreon chat after this actually. But in terms of if you go on the Fantasy Pros and you check advanced stats and advanced receiving stats, you'll get a lot of things like catch rate, drop rate, target share. They're the pictures you want to be trying to understand is who's getting what percentage of target share, and following that train and how consistent those numbers are. Because if they're not at this stage, you need to start fading. But at this point in the season, it's pretty straightforward. It's follow the teams that are scoring points, get as many players from those teams that are scoring points as possible, and don't overthink it. If the team isn't performing, try and reduce your fantasy liability there by having less players from that team, and don't try and manifest things that haven't happened unless there's a good case for it happening. So I've heard the Isaiah Likely thing from like 4 different people this week, and I'm like, who's driving that up, and what is it? And maybe they're smarter than me, maybe they probably are, and they probably have worked out something I haven't, but I can't see anything that is pointing to me thinking that that's a good outcome. Give me Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews has just signed a new deal. Like the franchise have told you that the franchise is Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I don't. To be honest, I hadn't seen it. I just seen someone asking the question. That's why I asked it. But
I've seen a couple of people mention it, and I was just a bit like, okay. And I dug into it a bit. So, and I think it's good, definitely, to explore and ask the questions. But for me, I think Darren Waller, where there is some proven commodity, but I am worried about the throw rate in Miami, and that's a genuine concern. And that would be one I would be looking at and thinking, I'm just not sure if I want to bet the house on Darren Waller versus maybe some other players. But also I think there's a safe floor there. I don't think you're going to lose much by going that way, but I don't think the big ceiling plays are out there. I think I'd be looking at my opponent this week. I'd be thinking how I can stop them generating points by picking up the best streamers, the best kickers. If they were looking at quarterback, making sure I block the best quarterback options. I think you've got to the point now where you could have done all you could have done there. And now you've got to set the best lineup for you and where you can manifest. I've given you some tips of players there, but we're going to have, good weeks.
Yeah, I think that's me for my questions. Anyway, is there an update you want to give on the? Are we on the semi-final? What rounds are we on now? In the
semi-final first leg, it's all very close in the FFCC. In all competitions, I think the biggest gap is 17 points. So. Yep, so you can still sign up for 2026. I think we're £160 off our super mega duper long stretch goal. So I'd like to hit that. We might do a fantasy playoff contest if people are up for that. I'd love to do something with that. So if there's enough interest, people write in the comments below, and we can get you signed up to that. We'll do something interesting there.
You have a Bertie coming up soon, don't you? How far are we from 1,000?
We're very close. Less than 10.
Yeah, I was just thinking it this morning. They must be close now.
Yeah, I think it might be 5 or 4. I don't know. I'll have to look. Maybe it's 6. I need to look at the numbers, but yeah, we're getting closer and closer by the week, and it's
Maybe do the 1,000th one on Super Bowl week or something.
well, I think we'll have to go dark for a few. I think I think I think given the season and the way we are with the season, we might do the 1,000th as the 1,000th, and then I think Super Bowl. I'd like to do like a big celebration, culminating the end of the season, 1,000 episodes. But I think it's kind of the wrong time of the year to do 1,000 like a big celebration. So I think we'll probably do a formal celebration at Super Bowl, maybe Super Bowl Sunday. I've been known to pull out 7-hour specials. We might have to do something for that. So we'll see. I'll be honest, I haven't given it as much thought as I should have done with everything that's been going on over the previous sort of 6 weeks or so with some family bits and pieces and some challenges that have been going on.
It's nearly time for you to finish work and have a break for Christmas as well.
I know. I had a day off yesterday and it just felt awful. I was just like, right, okay. Like most of it wasn't very well. So yeah, I've definitely cooked. But it's, lucky and blessed to do what I do. A week till Christmas. I've got a lot of contracts out, so it's going to be a busy week. But yeah, looking forward to putting the feet up and then enjoying the last couple of weeks of the season, and then enjoying playoff football. Whether the Bucks will be in it or not, I was pretty confident in September, October we'd be playing playoff football. Now I'm starting to think that might not be the case, which might be one of the greatest chokes in the history of the NFL if we don't get there. So we'll have to see. But we're getting closer and closer. I've got to think about the week 17 schedule. With that being the week of Christmas, how we offer people advice for their fantasy matchups and fantasy playoffs. So we'll try and get some stuff recorded for then. But in the meantime, fire questions on the Discord. Danny will kindly sort of notify me because I'll be honest, I'm still trying to get used to. Here's the type of question, right? For signing off, Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy? Always Pat Mahomes, even with the worst matchup. Always Pat Mahomes. Always start your starts. You drafted him for that reason. You got to start him. Like, you just got to. I think get your questions in the Discord. Anything you want to ask, do my best to answer them, and Danny will let me know when there's questions. So ping them across. That's for me, I want to do a boat parade where we get those ships into harbor to kick off the new year, all celebrating some shiny fantasy titles and fantasy hardware. So let's get as many people some fantasy titles, and then maybe we'll get a few people on talking about their fantasy titles and fantasy wins. I'd love to do that to kick off the New Year's in style. Hopefully some of our Patreons would have taken down some of the big tournaments in the in the world of fantasy tournaments, and we'll bring some of them on and we'll have a big party. But 3 weeks of work to do. So let me and let Danny help you win fantasy questions here. Here we go. Serious question. We'll rule out Henderson or Neal this week. Kamara's been ruled out. Henderson, we splitting time with Henderson, with Stevenson. It's always Henderson. He's not really splitting that much time. Coming off a bye, Henderson's going to be fresh. He's got a better matchup. I think I'd be starting Henderson every day of the week and twice on Sunday over Devin Neal. But thank you for your question. Give us a like and subscribe. Anything from you, Danny, before we wrap?
No, that's it, really. I think just keep an eye on the news. Make sure you've got backup plan Bs and ask your questions if you need them.
Yeah. Put the questions in the Discord. You can we'll put the link out. It won't be on this live stream. In fact, I'll put it in the chat quickly. Just while we run it up. So yeah, we'll take all the questions there. And we'll go from there. But hang on, let me try and find it quickly.
I'll put it in.
No, I've got it here. We're good. Okay. So I've just fired it in to the chat, so you can go ahead if you're watching this on the recording. I'll put it in the show notes when you're watching this back out. Join the Discord, and you can get all access to all of our information. But until then, Rush Nation, we will catch you next week, week 16, semi-final week. But until then, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.